This is Dimitri Lascaris coming to you from South Lebanon on May 29th, 2024. Behind me over my right shoulder is a sign of a non-governmental organization in Lebanon known as Green Without Borders. There's quite a remarkable story behind this organization. Green Without Borders is a Lebanese NGO that was established in 2013. Its mission was to reforest southern Lebanon, and it did that. In fact, focusing on the replantation of species of trees that are indigenous to this particular area. At this moment, I'm standing atop a mountain fortress known as Beaufort Castle. This fortress has been here for centuries, has played a historically important role in many military conflicts over the years in the south of Lebanon. Most recently, it was the site of a famous battle between militants of the Palestinian Liberation Organization and the Israeli military when Ariel Sharon was the defense minister. Off in the distance there on a hilltop, you may be able to see a red and white antenna, a tower. That is the Israeli military base of Metula, and it is adjacent to an Israeli settlement by the same name. That particular military base has come under attack repeatedly during the past 7 months of hostilities between the Israeli military and Hezbollah fighters. Down in the plain below, which is known as Sahel Arnoun, you can see many plantations. These have been installed, built up over the years by Green Without Borders. And some of these trees are actually quite short, less than a meter tall. They were newly planted. In 2023, in August of last year, before Israel's genocidal rampage in Gaza began, the Biden administration decided to designate Green Without Borders as a terrorist organization. Its logic being that these trees were being used by Hezbollah fighters for cover from Israeli drones and warplanes flying overhead. It's interesting to contrast the attitude of the Biden administration and the Israeli government towards Green Without Borders to their attitude towards the Jewish National Fund, which is given charitable status in the United States and other Western countries, including Canada, and which controls a large proportion of the land in historic Palestine and openly discriminates against Palestinians in the allocation of that land. One of the ways in which the Jewish National Fund, or JNF, has tried over the years to burnish its reputation amongst progressives and liberals in the West is to emphasize its environmental credentials. And you'll find that it claims to have reforested some 250,000 acres in historic Palestine, many of which are populated by species that are not indigenous to Palestine. Now, if we take the logic of the Biden administration and apply it to the forestations that have been built up over the years by the Jewish National Fund, if the Israeli military employs any of those forests for any military purposes whatsoever, because it is engaged in openly terroristic activity, as we now see with horrifying implications in Gaza, then it is in effect complicit in the terrorist activities of the Israeli government and ought to be treated as a terrorist organization, which is precisely what the Biden administration has done to Green Without Borders. This is all part of a larger war, by the way, that Israel and its Western backers are waging against nature. This week I had the opportunity to interview the civil defense director for the area of South Lebanon between the Litani River and the border with occupied Palestine. And he explained to me that in the past 7 months, the Israeli military has repeatedly used white phosphorus in order to set alight forests in South Lebanon where it claims Hezbollah fighters are active. In addition, I've seen at numerous points during my journey across the region of South Lebanon, forests that have been quite negatively impacted by Israeli artillery shells and other forms of bombardment. Here's a clip I took of a forest that had been badly damaged by the Israeli military just outside of the South Lebanese town of Nabatea. And while I'm on the subject of Israel's war against nature, I thought I'd share with you an experience we had yesterday. At the time, we were staying at a home out in the countryside in South Lebanon, a few kilometers from the border of occupied Palestine. And in the distance overhead, we could hear Israeli warplanes continuously for a few hours. We also heard drones circling overhead during that time, but we couldn't see them. There was cloud cover, and we imagined that they were flying above the clouds. But because this was an almost constant background noise, we thought that there was perhaps an airstrike about to be launched in the area where we were situated. So I took my camera outside and I just positioned it on a chair and left it running for about 40 minutes. And at the beginning, I'm going to share with you a clip from that footage. At the beginning, you can hear the natural environment around you. Birds are singing, there's a light wind, it's very calm, almost idyllic. In the distance, you can hear a low muffled sound of the warplanes flying overhead. And then suddenly, an airstrike happened, by our estimate, somewhere within 2 kilometers of our house, and it was an incredibly disruptive noise, something that was a shock to the system. And you can get a sense of the power of this thing and how it impacted the music of nature when it struck. Now, after setting my camera down on that chair, I took my laptop and sat down outside at a picnic table nearby, and for about 20 minutes or so was trying to work with the noise of the warplanes off in the distance. I was trying to block it out and be productive. And then suddenly I realized before the explosion occurred that everything had gone silent. And there was 2 minutes of absolute peace and quiet during which I convinced myself that everything was safe. And then suddenly that deafening explosion happened like a nearby thunderclap. It actually left my right ear ringing for some time because the explosion happened off to my right. And afterwards I mentioned to the Lebanese journalist who's my guide on this trip, Hadi Hotait, that I had experienced this, that there were these 2 minutes of silence before this strike. And he mentioned that this is a common practice, apparently, of the Israeli pilots, that somehow before the impact of their bombs, they manage in some strikes to go silent for a period of 2 or 3 minutes in order perhaps to avoid detection at the moment of the strike, or to increase the terrifying impact of the strike. I don't know which it is, but it was quite a shocking experience, frankly, and I can't even begin to imagine what it is like to be a child in Gaza and to have to listen to this and fear being a victim of this multiple times a day for months on end. Now, fortunately, we understand no one was injured in this airstrike, and certainly all of us were unscathed. And nonetheless, when we woke up this morning, we decided to leave the area where we were staying temporarily because during the night, the Hezbollah forces launched a quite audacious attack on a military base of Israel known as Ramya, which is near the border. And what was unusual about this attack is that somehow Hezbollah fighters, either by using tunnels or traveling entirely above ground, we don't know which, managed to get within dozens of meters of the edge of this military base and then began to hammer the military base with rocket-propelled grenades and mortars and other forms of weaponry. And here's a clip that was published by Hezbollah, which purports to show some of the attacks that were launched by Hezbollah fighters during this assault. We'll remain here at Beaufort Castle for a little while longer. Maybe we'll be able to see something from this vantage point in the combat areas near the border. But eventually we'll be heading back to Beirut. This, by the way, was not originally our plan to come to Beaufort Castle today. We had hoped to visit a Lebanese village by the name of Nakura, which has been very badly hit during the last 7 months. It's near the border, next to the Mediterranean coast of Lebanon. The problem is that when we tried to access that area, we had to pass through a Lebanese army military checkpoint. And although we had been given permission to enter a few days ago, they stopped us and said that the situation was simply too hot, possibly as a result of that very striking attack by Hezbollah forces on the Ramya military base last night. At that point, we tried to access another Lebanese border village by the name of Marjayun, which is not too far from the Israeli settlement of Kiryat Shimona. That has been evacuated, by the way. It too has been hit very hard during the past 7 months of combat. But there too, when we tried to pass through a Lebanese army military checkpoint, we were told that the situation was simply too dangerous. And so at that point, we came here to Beaufort Castle, where we are now situated. I'm perhaps going to be able to visit South Lebanon one more time before this trip comes to an end. But whether I can do that or can't, I'll do one more report from Beirut to summarize what I've observed on this, my 4th trip to Lebanon during the past 18 months. For now, this is Dimitri Lascaris signing off at Beaufort Castle in South Lebanon on May 29th, 2024.